Hi, welcome back to the channel. This week we're creating kicks in Serum 2. And to be honest, I have done this video before, but watching it back recently, there is quite a bit I wasn't happy with, quite a bit I didn't cover that well, and quite a bit I didn't explain that well. So let's see if we can do it better this time. So we have our trusty Serum 2 open here. Let's move that out of the way for now. And we also have a Simpler loaded. And Simpler is going to be for our reference kick. We want to have something we can look at. We want to have something we can understand what a good kick sounds and looks like. So here I've just loaded in a reference kick. I've turned on warp and repitch mode. I've turned off the filter and turned off the LFO. And in the controls, I've turned down the velocity to volume. So what that means is every time I press a key, it's always playing the same kick. I don't want it changing when I move up and down the keyboard. After that, I've added an oscilloscope. I'm using Oscillos, but you can use any one, followed by a utility, which will make sense later, and then an EQ. Once again, you can use any EQ, you can use any oscilloscope, doesn't matter. We're just using these for visualization and reference. So let's play back our kick. Let's turn down the output of Serum so we don't get that in the display. And here I've just paused the kick so we can have a little look at what's happening. So first up, you can see it's a bit of a fish shape. We have the high frequency content here, and the sine wave is sweeping from the high frequencies down to the bass frequency or to the fundamental around this region here. This is where the bass of the kick comes from. We have our window size set to 1/8. So what that means is that this line down the middle, which is very, very faint, denotes 1/16. And we can see our kick ending around here, which is 1/16 dotted. And this is just something that I like to do. I like to create kicks at 1/16 dotted duration. Now, obviously, that's a bit arbitrary because when you move it to a different project, it's going to be longer or shorter based on the tempo. But personally, I find that that length of a kick works quite well. And it's still going to be relatively 1/16 dotted unless you're changing tempos dramatically. And the reason for that is because, like I said, this is 1/16, which means that the kick is the only sound in this space, and then the bass starts to come in here. So as you know, we have kick, bass, 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 kick, bass, bass, bass. So this is the first of those bass notes. So if we split it at 1/16, we can have the bulk of the kick pitch sweep down to this line here, down to 1/16, and then we can have it relatively flat in the second 16th, which makes it very easy to align to our bass note. And typically we don't want much activity happening here anyway, because this is where the bass happens. So in most of my kicks, you'll find that the sweep, like I said, happens down to here, then this bit is relatively flat, if not completely flat. So now we know what our shape should look like. Let's have a look at our EQ. So here I've drawn in 2 points. The first one is where the kick rests. This is the landing frequency. In this case, it's at 55 Hz, which is the first octave, A1. And then you can see here it starts around the 7th octave, around 2400 Hz. So this is our sweep range essentially. So 7th octave and 1st octave. That's our takeaway from this. While we're here, let's turn down the gain of the sampler because we want that to appear in an oscilloscope, but we don't want to listen to it anymore. We'll turn on Serum and we'll open up the oscilloscope of that one. Let's change this to 1/4 so we can see it constantly. So like I said, we have our reference kick playing in orange, but we can't hear it. And instead, we can only hear Serum. I've also programmed in some MIDI notes into Serum. This is D#1. And the reason for that is because, first of all, I want the kick or the track to be in D#. And we learned earlier that the kick rests in the 1st octave. So I've placed these here on the 1st octave. That just makes working with it a little bit easier later. Let's go into Serum and we'll change this to a sine wave. And we'll turn the output up so it matches the level of our reference, like so. Now the first thing we're going to do is draw in our reference shape. We want that, create that fish kind of visualization. So let's attach LFO1 to the level. We'll turn that up to where it was, which is around 80. We'll change the rate to 1/8 because we're working to this window, so we want to have 1/16 there and 1/16 dotted there. That will make it easy to work with. So essentially it's going to look something like, let's just draw something rudimentary in first. It's going to look something like that. But to make this easier, let's go into a utility. We're going to turn this down for the moment because the next bit is quite unpleasant and I don't want to deafen you all and I don't want to listen to it. Let's turn the octaves all the way up. Let's get rid of this for now. And you can see we have basically a solid green block here. Let's make that even more pronounced by going onto our MIDI. We'll turn that up, maybe 2 octaves. And now by doing that, we can very easily trace around this kick. So let's put this back to what it was. We know it's going to end around there. Now this one I'm making exactly 1/16 dotted, so it won't end exactly in line with the reference. And I should reiterate, I'm not replicating this kick one for one. We're just getting an idea of the tonality and the shape from this reference. There's going to be no sound while I do this because we don't want to listen to that horrible, horrible, very high-pitched sine. You can see this tail at the end. That's because we have to set to retrig. Let's put this to envelope. And we'll come back and tweak this. We just want something just like as a working guide for now. Because obviously we're going to tweak this when we can actually hear it. We're just getting a bit of a, like I said, a guide. So now that we've done that, let's put our octaves back down to 0. And also we'll do the same in the MIDI. Let's turn them down 2 octaves, back to where they were. We can also turn the gain back up. The first thing to notice, or 2 things to notice. One, this is dancing around, which we certainly don't want in a kick drum. Let's turn that random phase down to 0. Another thing to notice is that while we have the tail or the bulk of the kick is relatively lined up with the reference in terms of the shape, the start isn't. That's because we have no pitch curve yet, which means it currently has much less resolution at the start of the kick. It only has 1 oscillator cycle, or 2 by the time we get to here, whereas in the reference it has dozens of cycles in that short period. But that's what we're going to fix now. So let's now go to LFO2, change this to 1/8 dotted also, change this to envelope while we're here, and we'll draw in our curve. Like I said, we want this to be 1/8 dotted, put this down so it stops exactly on the 1/16th, and we'll draw in a rudimentary curve like that. It's going to change a lot, and then we'll put this up to our coarse pitch. We'll put this on unipolar for the moment. That will change, but I'll explain why in a moment. And we'll turn the depth all the way up. Obviously this comes down. And now, like I said, we have the resolution. Everything is more in line with the reference kick. And we can start to resemble a kick, even though at this stage it is obviously terrible. So let's have a look at the modulation. We have this curve all the way up and we have it all the way down. So in this LFO, we can confirm we are maxing out the range of this. If we go to the matrix, we are also maxing out the range or the depth of this LFO here. But let's have a look at our slider. See here we have 2 rows, LFO2 to A coarse pitch 100%, and then below that range. Currently it's on 64, and watch what happens when we get below 50%. And keep an eye on the range. Still 64, then we get down to 50, still 64, and now the range changes. So what's happening is this modulation is maxing out at 50% or 64 semitones. So when we turn it further up, it doesn't do anything. So the way to remedy that, we turn this to bipolar, and now we have a range of plus and minus 64. So we've essentially doubled the range of this modulation. Now, one thing to be wary of here is that because we have changed this to bipolar, this line in the middle here, this was a unity before. This is where our D sharp 1 note is placed. So because we're going below that now, we're going below D sharp 1, which is why you can't hear basically the lower end. You can only hear the click, and then it goes below the audible range. And in fact, you can see this on our EQ. We're way down here. So what we need is we need to bring the pitch up so that it comes back to our D sharp 1. And that seems to be 4 octaves. Around here is where we want. However, the other thing to note, and this might get a bit confusing, when this range is fully maximized, it is plus 64 semitones. So we're at this point, it is plus 64, and at this point, it is minus 64. And just a bit of maths, 64 semitones equates to 5.33 octaves. So if we set our note here, and then we're modulating at 5.33 octaves below, then we're no longer on D sharp. So to fix that, instead of having a range of plus and minus 64, let's change that to the closest number divisible by 12. So that's 120. So now we have 5 up and 5 below. So now we're going to be back resting on D sharp. And we're almost there. Now it's a case of fine-tuning this curve. So it's sounding quite good, except it's too much in the high frequencies. So one thing to note, don't go and change this LFO2 because we set this up perfectly. Instead, let's create another one, exactly the same, coarse pitch, and this one we will change negative, so to -12, and we'll attach this to a macro, and it's important that this one is on unipolar. And because it's on unipolar, it's only going to affect the high sweep. It's going to leave the fundamental or the landing note completely in place. So let's just check that on an EQ. Let's turn this up, and you can see this high content disappear while our bass stays the same. Well, let's make this a bit more pronounced. Let's turn this down to, let's go 4 octaves, which is a bit too much, but just to demonstrate. With it off, and it up. This stays exactly the same, but all this high energy is now gone. So let's make this go 24 semitones. That gives a good range. Let's have a look here. We are in the 7th octave, around 2800 Hertz, which was quite close to our reference. And also down here, we are still in the 1st octave, as per the reference also. And just with a bit of tweaking, we now have this. Let's have a listen to the reference. We weren't A-Bing it because, like I said, we weren't trying to replicate it. We have that one, and then the Serum one. I quite like it. So there we go, kicks in Serum 2. And the first half of this video with using a reference, you don't really need to do that if you're quite familiar with this curve and how it should look. But also if you are trying to replicate a kick, this method does help. So there you go. Hope you enjoyed that. Hope you learned something, and I'll see you next time. Bye bye.